Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Down Under Bunker here in Sydney, Australia. Today, bringing out Axis and Allies anniversary 1941 setup. So, going back to earlier in the war, the battle for Russia hasn't started yet. China's looking pretty weak. Japan's only earning $17 a turn, and they're looking pretty weak as well. So, keen to get into this one. I forgot who won last time. I think it was the Allies though, but I can go check that. If you missed both of those videos, you probably should go check them out. They were interesting games. I think I remember that. But should be fun today. Not playing with a bid. I don't play with those rules. I think it's pretty balanced. Yeah. Anyway, looking forward to playing it, and I'll see you after round one. Alright, just finished round one, and the Allies are showing their hand already, saying which side they're going to dominate, and it is the Pacific side. They've decided to do a bit of a kill Japan first strategy, but I'll take you through what happened in this round and what led to the Allies doing this. So as we can see here, the Russians started things off for the Allies, chucking 7 units on the border of Manchuria, 4 units into China. Now, Japan went next and they had to respond. They had to keep all their units in China and Kiangsu, took Kwangtung in Philippines and the Money Islands and Burma. So work was still done, but they're looking pretty weak. They did take out the battleship off the coast of Hawaii and the destroyer and transport off the coast of San Francisco, but the Americans have built up appropriately, spending all their $40 in the Pacific and getting an insta-fleet, as I like to call it. Defending Hawaii, though, from this potential transport attack, I doubt they'll do it. The Australians can come back up and take it if they like, or the British could come and take the Money Islands back. The British risked everything buying a factory in India despite the Japanese presence. They came for a fighter from Egypt into here, took the 2 infantry from Transjordan on a transport into India, so they bulked up as much as they could. And if the Japanese don't take that next round, then could already be game over for them. They didn't kill 1 Chinese unit, so China's looking pretty strong so far. Over here though, the consequences of doing a kill Japan first strategy is that Italy has done quite well for itself. With only 2 British units in Africa left, they were able to just walk in and take Egypt, took Transjordan as well, getting lots of bonuses. They collected $23 this turn, 10 from bonuses. They built a couple land units, sent units to Russia to help out the Germans. Now the Germans themselves attacked into Russia, didn't bother attacking the Baltic states, we'll see if that was a mistake or not, but rather have kind of focused more down south. And in response, the Russians have bulked up in the Caucasus as much as they could, building a fighter there for a bit of offense, bringing some artillery down south as well. The Russians, though, did take the opportunity to attack Finland, killing the 2 German units that were there without loss. Now putting pressure on Norway, which has a bomber and a fighter, so the Germans will have to skedaddle out of there. Karelia is looking pretty safe, though, and the Germans do have a bit coming, though. The Germans building a bomber, and they did take out the British Navy, apart from cruiser and destroyer in Season 12 and destroyer and transport in Season 9. But the British, of course, just built a whole big navy, took out a submarine that was left over, and the Americans have brought a couple bombers over, and I'm sure they'll start bombing Germany just to keep them in check while they take out Japan. So looking alright for the Allies so far. I think the big deciding factor will be if India falls, and whether Russia can maybe even push back at Germany in this next round. But find out right after this. Round 2 is finished, and the game is definitely leaning towards the Allies, swinging in their favour after a couple of big battles that have shaped how this game is played now. Well, let's start here in the Pacific where Japan is in real trouble. Not only do the Americans have a massive fleet here with ground units to accompany, they had a big problem in India this turn. They attacked and failed miserably, lost 3 or so units, didn't kill one British unit or Russian unit who was backing up there. So they decided to retreat back to Burma. The British took the opportunity, took Burma, and now they're in a whole lot of trouble. They did take in there Fukien, I believe, but the Japanese were able to, the Chinese, were able to take the Japanese out of there without loss. So the Japanese are looking very, very weak at the moment. The Russians did attack into Manchuria, and that is the one good thing that happened to the Japanese this turn. Were able to hold off that attack, but still took a couple casualties. So Japan's not looking that good. The British have no ships left in the Pacific. The Indian and Australian tiny fleets were destroyed, but the Americans, as I said, do have a big fleet there. Heading over into Europe, we see that the Italians have taken more of Africa and taken Persia just to stop the Russian tank getting back to the Caucasus, but the fighter can get back, no worries. The Americans have come in and taken Morocco, Algeria. The bomber from Norway, which was taken on the Russian turn by the Russians, there was a bomber in Norway and it came 1, 2, 3, 4 to sea zone 9, where the American destroyer and transport were. Tried to kill it, the bomber missed, the destroyer hit, so the Germans lost 1 bomber there, and then the Americans came and landed in Morocco, Algeria, taking out the German unit that was there, taking that dollar, and now Italy has to respond to that. You might be wondering where the other German bomber is. Well, it took a shot at the factory in London, and the AA gun shot it down. So issues for the Germans, their air force is looking very depleted, and they also lost another fighter destroying a destroyer in sea zone 6, so they're down to 3 fighters. The Italians though have helped Germany defend France because the British have a massive fleet here, and the units to accompany it as well. The German factory was bombed this round, thanks to the British and Americans. The Americans did lose a bomber though, so the Germans are a bit happy about that. As I said, the Russians took Norway, Finland was already taken, but we have an interesting situation here in the Eastern Front, where the Russians have a lot of units up north, and they bought a few aggressive attacking units, an artillery and a tank up there, so they could be looking to push down south with that force. Karelia does look pretty safe at the moment. The Germans have decided to put everything that they could into Ukraine to try to take Stalingrad. As you can see, that is what it's like, and the Russians have responded, putting 4 infantry in eastern Ukraine because they didn't want the 2 Italian tanks from Bulgaria or Romania doing a can opener move for the 6 German tanks there, and then taking Russia. So bulked up that and put a few units in Belarusia as well. But Caucasus could be a battle next turn. I don't think the Germans will attack, but they are getting pretty desperate because this game is not looking good for the Axis. I imagine Japan will be swept up once their navy's gone, which it most likely will. They are in big, big trouble. But the game can change in a matter of turns. Will that happen in this game? You're about to find out. Well, we've just finished round 3, and the Axis are going to need to get a move on if they're going to stay in contention for the win, especially over here in Russia. They still haven't taken 1 victory city from the Russians, which is not good for them. The Allies are already landing in Western Europe, just another problem for them to worry about. So let's take you through what happened this round, where, as you can see, the Germans have backed up France, including an AA gun, which meant the British and American bomber had free reign over the German factory. Both of them rolled 6s, so that's 12 damage the Germans have to repair. The British did land in northwestern Europe, taking 1 casualty for it, but now the Germans have to respond to that. Or all of that plus the units in London will hit France next turn, so that's not very good, or even potentially Germany, who knows. Down here in Africa, the Italians landed infantry and artillery in Libya. The Americans took their infantry and artillery from Morocco, Algeria into Libya, and you can see the result of that. No unit survives there. But down here in Middle Africa, Southern Africa, the British protecting South Africa and Rhodesia by putting out 2 blockers, but now the Italians have an infantry and an artillery that could hit Belgian Congo. Maybe the British will hit Anglo-Egyptian Sudan with 2 infantry, but who knows. The Russians are on their way to help though, try to take Egypt back. They got rid of the pesky Italian troop there, sent an infantry down to make sure they wouldn't lose the tank. Italian didn't hit back anyway, but better to be safe than sorry. So now the Russians have a choice, either send them back up to Russia or maybe put pressure on the Italians here. And I like the latter option. In here we see, in Russia, we see that the Germans have had a big switch of plan, took all the tanks and as much stuff as they could into the Baltic states, and Russia responded accordingly, stacking as much as they could in Karelia. It's looking pretty safe. There is a fighter there if you can see that. A couple tanks, lots of men. See what the Germans do. They could attack, would be a bit risky, but if it paid off, that would really work for them. Down here now, the Russians have a massive force, so Ukraine, the Germans will probably back out of there, but then that leaves the southern flank open for the Russians to plow through. So lots of stuff happening in Europe. And over here in the Pacific, we see the Japanese have more problems. The British continue to buy men in India, and they took French Indochina, Thailand, taking out that national bonus. Not only does it give the British $5 for owning a original Japanese territory, takes away $5 from the Japanese because they don't control that territory there. French Indochina. The Chinese have taken Guangdong back. They are allowed to go in there. For anyone who doesn't know, China is not allowed to go move their units out of their home spaces, Jiangsu, Manchuria, and Guangdong. So those are the only spots they're allowed to move their troops. So they just took that buck back for the British. And it's also a victory city, so that's important as well. The Americans have made a big move down to the Solomon Islands, bringing their whole fleet. So now the Japanese have not got much that can hit it, only the stuff in the Philippines can actually hit the American fleet, and obviously they're not going to do that. The Japanese did build an aircraft carrier, already had 2 fighters for it, did build a battleship and a submarine as well, and they're starting to pump out tanks in Manchuria. But the Americans, if that wasn't enough, the Americans have gone ahead and bought a whole nother fleet, another Insta fleet, that can come back this one up. So big problems for Japan right now. It is looking like it will be a Allies victory, but keep playing of course. Now that it is only 13 victory cities for the win, it could be over very shortly, because the Allies started with 12, so if they take back all their original ones, there's only one left that they haven't taken back, which is Manila. They only need to take one Axis original victory city. So if they take Manila, you would think they could take Shanghai or even take Paris. So it's not looking good for the Axis, but we'll see how it goes. I'll see you after round 4. Alright, we've come to the end of round 4 in this game of Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition. And the Allies are really pushing forward now. The Japanese are in a whole lot of trouble. The Germans are looking in trouble as well. And probably the Italians, to be honest, are looking the most comfortable from the Axis. Over here in the Pacific, we see the Americans have made a massive move, chucking everything they have into the Caroline Islands. and I don't think the Japanese will be wanting to attack, although they do have a bomber in Japan and Philippines. But will that be enough to overtake all of that navy? I don't think so. But the Japanese might have to do that, because if they don't, then the Americans could just start taking up these money islands. The Americans wanted to take the money islands this turn, but the Japanese had put a blocker in New Guinea, which was taken out by American fighters. So, well done there. Americans building another Insta-fleet and a fighter as well. So they're just continuing to build up sea units until Japan has none left. So Japan is not looking good at all. The British are on their way up through China. The Japanese did take Hubei this turn, but the Chinese were able to take that back. So the Japanese lost their 3 tanks, probably only for about 3 Chinese infantry. So not the best trade for the Japanese there. The British now building 3 tanks to turn in India. That is going to really hurt the Japanese as well. Down here in Africa, the Italians have taken out Belgian Congo. The British now have a decision to make. Do they try to take Egypt back, or do they protect South Africa? They'll probably protect South Africa because the Italians destroyed the infantry and tank that the Russians had in Transjordan, so now they have free reign there. The Italians destroyed a Russian submarine in Sea Zone 12, just thought that they wanted to get rid of that now instead of it causing troubles later on. The British, though, have made a big move into Karelia, moving their fleet into the Baltic Sea, right next to Germany, so the Germans are a bit worried now. The Germans had taken Karelia, but the British quickly took that back, and now the Germans have nothing on the Eastern Front. The Italians pushed into Belorussia, but it's not a very big force at all, and the Russians building heaps of tanks. The Russians did push into the Ukraine, and Germans now, with the help of the Italians, bulking up in Bulgaria, Romania. Germans dispatched of the northwestern Europe force that the British had, and now they're thinking that this will be their little task force to go around and destroy any British landings on the western side of their territory. Let's see what else happened in this round. Not much else really. Japanese continue to build units up and sea units. Russians now have a big advantage. Italians continue to build lots of ground units to help out in France. But lots more to come in this game. Not looking good for the Allies. Axis. The Allies are looking amazing. But game could be over in a couple rounds. We'll see. Find out how round 5 went right after this. It's the end of round 5 in this game of Axis and Allies Anniversary Edition. And the Axis have a sliver of hope in the Pacific, but not in Europe. Here in the Pacific, there was a major battle off the coast of the Caroline Islands where the Japanese chucked every single naval unit they could and every single plane, which is all of their air force, into the Caroline Islands, and that was the result of it. So the Japanese winning with a couple battleships and a cruiser left, and a couple bombers and a fighter. So that's good for them, and they have 5 transports and a destroyer off the coast of Japan. The Americans tried to destroy those battleships and cruiser by attacking with a battleship and 2 destroyers and a fighter. They missed completely. The Japanese got 2 hits, so they lost a destroyer. And then the Americans retreated out of there. The Americans, though, are building fighters and a bomber and a couple more destroyers. The British and Chinese and even Russian combined force have not made a move this turn on the Japanese. Japanese deciding to go defensive, defending Shanghai by putting all of their tanks there, building 3 more as well. So interesting situation there. I think they're hoping that they can solidify the sea and then go for land. But now the British are building in naval units off the coast of India. 2 destroyers, really showing that they want to get rid of this Japanese navy. No land units in India this turn, but bringing up their other land units. It's not looking good for the Japanese at the moment. They're only earning $25 a turn, and they're not even putting all of that into Navy. And the Americans are earning $49 a turn, and the Americans are putting all of that into Navy in the Pacific side, nothing in the Atlantic, so not good for Japan at the moment. The Italians have given up a chance to take India. Big surprise, but they went to take Morocco, Algeria to get that $5 bonus. They were probably thinking, well, if they take India, then the tanks will just come back and take it right back. So interesting choice there. They did take Italian Africa. The British retreated to Rhodesia. The Italians building a fighter and a lot more ground units, while also helping defend Bulgaria, Romania and Poland, where the Russians had pushed forward, clearing out all Axis units in Russia, with the help of the British, of course, but the Russians now, huge stack of units in East Poland, massive stack of tanks in Belarus as well, and the Caucasus that can hit Bulgaria, Romania, or Poland. So the Germans are in trouble, Italians are in trouble. Landings on the western side of Germany continue as well. Almost took out northwestern Europe. The Germans have one tank left there. They haven't gone to France yet, but soon enough I'm sure they will. And the Germans just don't have enough money to keep defending the western side and now the eastern side. So not looking good at all for the Axis at the moment. I believe the Axis currently have 7 victory cities. Japan has 3, the Italians 1 and Germany 3. Which means the Allies have 11, so the Allies only need 2 more to win. And very possibly it could be Manila and Shanghai. Could be Warsaw and Paris, could be Warsaw and Shanghai, so the game could only go on for a couple more rounds, but we'll see. It is a very interesting game at the moment, and look forward to playing some more, so I'll see you after round 6. It's the end of round 6, and there could be a twist in the tale. The Axis kind of resurging in Europe, and the Pacific has been a half-decent round for the Japanese, so Allies are still definitely on top, but you never know in this game. Out here in the Pacific, the Japanese have dispatched of most of the Allied Navy, apart from the ones that were built this turn by the Americans. They dispatched the destroyer and battleship off the coast of Hawaii without loss, and then they fought off and attacking 2 American destroyers, 3 fighters and a bomber, only losing a cruiser and a battleship, so good turn for them. The Americans had built a aircraft carrier thinking that probably 1 fighter would be left, but not to be. Over here, the Japanese have destroyed the 2 British destroyers, losing 1 bomber in the process, but I think they're pretty happy with that. In China, nothing has happened this turn. The Chinese did 3 infantry attack into Shanghai. Japanese lose 1 guy, Chinese lose 3. But that means the Chinese can build infantry on the border again, because if you don't know, China can't put infantry into a place where they already have 3. The British having to build 3 tanks because of the Italians in Persia. They're not too worried about the Italians, but they do need to start getting a move on, because if they want to take Shanghai, they really need to do it soon. The Japanese have now 7 tanks there and continue to build up. Although with the Japanese really low on cash, they're not really able to continue building 3 tanks a turn and naval units, so could be good for the Allies. Down here in Africa, the Italian artillery attacked the lone British infantry, and the British infantry won, so sure enough that will be cleaned up until the Italians send their navy down here. The Italians did take Gibraltar, and they built a massive stack of 5 tanks this turn, so I wonder where that will be going. The British landed in northwestern Europe with 1 loss, but now the Germans have to respond to that. And there has been an attack into Russia. The Germans pushed everything that they could into East Poland, took out that massive stack despite only getting 2 hits on the first round. The Italians helped out by taking out the British force in the Baltic states, so the Russians are looking a bit weak. Although they do have a lot of stuff in Russia, not looking so good. Karelia could fall, but the British might come and save them. So that's all from this round. The Americans continue to build nothing in the Atlantic. Still very interesting. Still looking like an Allied victory, but we'll find out after round 7 if the Axis continue to push into Russia. It's now the end of round 7, about to start round 8, and the Axis are in with a chance still. They continue to push back, making the Allies really think about what they're going to do next. Over here in the Pacific, the Japanese have come and taken a Chinese territory, finally breaking out with their stack of tanks. It was counter-attacked by British units, but the British had bad rolls, the Japanese had good rolls, so the British got out of there. The British continue to buy 3 tanks per turn in India and send them up to China. Manchuria was left a bit exposed this turn because the Japanese chucked 2 men in Soviet Far East. The Chinese came in with 3 infantry and a fighter into Manchuria, got 2 hits, which killed the remaining 2 infantry, but unfortunately for the Chinese, the Japanese got 4 hits, all 3 of the tanks hitting and 1 of the infantry. So there is no more Chinese fighter on the board. In the sea, the Japanese really don't have a navy now, just a lone battleship trying to escape with a destroyer. Few fighters though, so maybe an aircraft carrier in the future. But the Americans have a lot of stuff, including transports now, so the Philippines probably will be taken very shortly, same as the Money Islands, and that will really hurt the Japanese. Africa is slowly getting taken back by the British, with the lone infantry there. Also, in here, in the Mediterranean, the British came down and destroyed the Italian fleet, landed in Morocco, Algeria and Gibraltar, so Africa is pretty secure now for the Allies. Keep taking back that money, hurt Italy's economy. Italy though, past 2 turns have built 5 tanks, so another big stack of units in Italy, massive stack of Italian units in Bulgaria, Romania. Now the Russians have a few issues with the Germans stacking everything they got into the Baltic states. Karelia looks pretty secure, Belarusia not so much, so with this Italian attack into Ukraine, which will probably happen, the Caucasus could be under threat, so is there a twist to the tale in this game? The landings in France and northwestern Europe stopped for a turn, although more units were built. The Russians did dispatch of the Italian units in Persia just to help out the British a little. So that's all from this round. This game is definitely very interesting. Could be a twist. Find out right after this. Round 8 is done, and the Axis are going to have to pull something special out of the bag if they're even going to hold on for one more round in this game. The Allies are on 12 victory cities, the Axis 6. So there's only one more victory city the Allies need to take to win this game. Well, let's go through the round, and in the Pacific, the Japanese continue to fall. They did take a bit more Russian territory, but they lost Manchuria to the Russians, and heavy casualties taking it back as well, losing a few tanks as well as most of their infantry. The British put in a devastating attack into Shanghai, but ultimately failed, leaving it exposed for the Chinese to come in and take, so that's another victory city taken away from the Japanese. And we can see here that the Americans have a decent navy with stuff on the transports that can reach the Philippine Islands, resulting in the last victory city needed. You might be wondering, well, the Japanese, couldn't they, with that navy that they built this turn, because they couldn't build any tanks, couldn't they just sit in the Philippine Islands and defend it? Well, the Americans have gone ahead and bought 4 bombers. And that would cause some havoc. I don't think the Japanese would be able to survive, but they would probably give it a go. In Africa here, the British continue to take back Italian territory with the help of the Russians. The Russians absolutely stacking everything they have in the Baltic states, making a push for Warsaw. The Italians making a bold decision. Instead of moving all their units into Poland to defend, they've pushed forward into Ukraine. I think they just saw that there wasn't much point in defending because the Philippine Islands will probably fall. But if they don't, then the Italians have a chance to take Stalingrad, and that could change the game. But the chances of the Philippines not falling is very slim. France was taken this turn by the British. The Italians promptly came and took that back on their go. The British continue to build up units in the mainland as well, so another landing next turn is imminent as well. So it is not looking good for the Axis. This, I'm assuming, will be the last round. But never say never. That is the motto that the Axis are adopting now. But we will find out right after this if this is the last round of the game or if the Axis will continue on fighting. End of round 9 and end of the game. The Axis have lost. The Allies succeed once again. Closer than expected in the end. A few unexpected moves by the Axis. A few things the Allies forgot to do to try seal it up, but in the end it worked out for them. So let's go through this last round where the Americans completely forgot where the Japanese could put a blocker in the Caroline Islands. So the Japanese did that, but in the end it didn't matter, and I'll show you why on the European side. Once the Italian turn was over, we pretty much stopped the game. The Americans just did that for fun. The Chinese didn't go this turn, but the British were able to take Shanghai, giving the Allies the victory there. And the big battle was in Poland. The Russians took that, and what a last battle it was. The Russians had it. The Italians brought in so much stuff. A few infantry, few artillery, about 10 tanks against Russia's 10 tanks and a couple artillery. Probably the closest battle the whole game, and it was pretty much the last battle of the game, down to one Russian tank left. That is how close that battle was, and that won the game for the Allies. So that is the end of this game. Interesting strategy by the Allies to go kill Japan first. It seemed to pay off. Japanese weren't able to really ever expand massively. And Germany completely failing at Operation Barbarossa. I think the best Axis player was the Italians in the end. They at some point were buying 5 tanks a turn, so that says a lot about their game. But that is all for now. Thanks for tuning in everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Down Under Bunker signing off.